Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the What's Important Now podcast. Chief Ryan Landrum coming to you from the U.S. Border Patrol Academy in Artesia, New Mexico. This is the third episode of Season 2. Chief Jason Owens concluded Season 1 a few episodes ago. I've picked up the mantle, carrying the W.I.N podcast forward. I've had the opportunity to speak to an executive in the National Capital Region, had the opportunity to speak to a chief on the southern border, and today I have my very first guest from the northern border, Chief of the Grand Forks sector, Anthony Scott Good. Welcome, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. It's first time doing a podcast. First time being in a fancy room like this with all the sound equipment.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Chief Owens did a fantastic job of modernizing the way we are able to communicate in the platforms and setting this thing up. And really gives folks like you, Chief on our northern border, a voice to talk to your story and also to talk to the people of Grand Forks in a different way.
Great. Appreciate it.
So before we get into it, I'd like to just kind of give you a little background on Chief Good. So Chief Good entered on duty with the U.S. Border Patrol in 2001 as a member of Class 466 and he EOD'd in the Calexico station in the El Centro sector. So Chief, I have to ask you, do you remember your class chant?
Man, the hardest question's right up front, huh? 466, there is none better. 466, the standard setter.
That's a good one. And, we talk about this often, like, the Border Patrol is a big family and there's certain things along the way. And you kind of talked about this in the graduation ceremony this morning with the class 1179. But there's things that people that you never forget and there's things that you never forget. And for some reason, maybe we say it so many times over the course of the 5 or 6 months that we spend in the academy, you just never forget the chant.
Yeah.
So you started off at Calexico. How was Calexico circa 2001?
It was high adventure. It was just migrants running everywhere. There was some drug traffic, not as much as I'd seen, later in Ajo and different places. But, just the migration, illegal migration into the United States, there was just a lot at the time. And so it was a great place to start your career and learn all the things. Sometimes learn things the hard way, but, you learn a lot. And when you're put in a high risk environment like that.
So interesting enough, you talk about, you mentioned Ajo, and we're going to get into that. You go to Ajo, you go to Laredo, you spend a lot of time kind of combing the southwest border in different leadership positions. But if you look back in terms of history, we talk a lot about the flow of migration inward into the United States. So do you remember the demographic of migrants that you were generally encountering in the field in El Centro circa 2001?
Yeah, it was typically Mexican. Yeah. Every once in a while, there'd be a large group of Brazilian, and then the trainees, me would have to go, process or whatever. But typically, it was Mexican. Yeah.
So when he mentions being a trainee, when he and I came in, and many of the predecessors that we've had, our environment as new agents is we were first in the door and we were last out of the door. So anything that had to be processed, anything that had to be taken care of, from, again, processing migrants to washing the vehicle, making sure it had gas. We were the first ones to volunteer for those assignments because, we wanted to keep our jobs. We could not probably believe that we were being paid to do this type of work. Basically go out and play hide and go seek, if you will, back in those days. But it speaks to the character of a Border Patrol agent over time. We just volunteer to do the jobs that nobody else wants to do. And that starts from almost day one when you get out of the Border Patrol Academy.
Yeah, very true.
So you also, and kind of going back, the demographic, are you familiar with the demographic going through the El Centro sector now? Or just generally on the southwest border? It's probably,
just other than Mexican is just, right. It's just surprising. It's, they see it so much now, but like just countries, Venezuela, Cuba, like just so many different nationalities, just it's amazing. To see the way it's changed, the demographic that migrating into the United States.
So I had the same experience. It was predominantly folks from Mexico, and even more so, people from right on the border. This was in El Paso, 2000 when I came in. It was predominantly Mexicans from Ciudad Juarez that were coming across the border, and we'd catch them, return them immediately, and we might catch them 3 or 4 times, 5 times a night, and just play that kind of back and forth game all night with them. But over time, migration patterns shift, and this plays out all over the southwest border, potentially even the northern border. We even get, some might be surprised, we get Mexicans that enter illegally from Canada.
Yes.
Right, which maybe you can illuminate for us a little bit later on. But the job generally doesn't change. We still do the same job. The folks we encounter, how we process those folks now, those types of things ebb and flow with policy changes. But generally, the answering the age-old question of who came in last night and how many people did you catch kind of remains the same. So moving on, you also then promote. You start promoting at this point. I think this is about 2006 or so. You start promoting to a supervisory border patrol agent at the Blythe station in Yuma. Yuma is the westernmost sector in Arizona, and just to the east of your former sector, El Centro.
Right.
So you're 5 or so years in now, and you become a first line supervisor in a whole new sector at a whole new station. Tell me about that.
What a learning curve that was. It's a little bit of animosity. I was a little younger than a lot of, but, when you look at being a soup, I was at a time when there wasn't a lot of people putting in for a supervisor, and, there was, I think, several people that got the position, that were offered the position before me and turned it down. So, I got it through attrition at that point. Yeah. And proud to do it. I worked hard. And so when you're kind of younger like that, you have something to prove, right? And so, still, not a trainee anymore, but I'm still first one in, last one out, making sure that the mission gets done, making sure that I'm taking care of the people. It's the first time where I'm in a leadership role where, I'm not just taking care of myself anymore. I'm taking care of others.
Yeah, it's a critical role.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, interestingly enough, kind of a sidebar on this, but you promote to a different station, right? So there's stories throughout time, and there's nothing wrong with either path, but many folks will promote from a border patrol agent to a supervisory border patrol agent, which is a first line supervisor, and then within the same station. And then you have to start supervising your former peers literally overnight from one day to the next. You took the path, as did I, where you went somewhere else. Do you have a sense of, which one might be the better path, or which one you might recommend for somebody who might be listening and trying to make that leap from a border patrol agent to a supervisory border patrol agent?
I would always say go to somewhere else, right? Just as a learning experience, and to be able to grow as a leader, to be able to have, to step out of that tunnel vision of looking, this is the way it was in Calexico. Well, it's completely different in Blythe, and it's completely different anywhere you go on the border. Yeah. Somebody asked me, what's the border like? Well, what part of the border are we talking about? Right. It would be great to have been a supervisor where all my friends are, and, that kind of thing. But I think I avoided some expectations of, not necessarily nepotism, but, like helping a friend out, that kind of thing, where maybe I'm taking favoritism or something like that, and to be a good leader, you've got to be above reproach and really just being as fair as possible to the workforce.
I couldn't agree more. I often give that same advice. It's my own experience as well. And there's nothing wrong with it. Like, if you want to be a border patrol agent and a supervisor in the same station, it can be done, and you can do it very well. But generally speaking, I think it's more advantageous for the new supervisor, for you learning. And the other issue, it's more advantageous for both sets of former peers and now your new subordinates. It's both paths are just fine, but if you get the opportunity, I would highly recommend considering, at a minimum, going from a border patrol agent to a supervisor at a different station. That being said, promotion within station is a little less hard to do, because now you've already spent time in that leader role, right? Critical role, first line supervisor, you're kind of that go-between between station management and the field. So you kind of get it from all different ways. So making a jump to a field operations supervisor, what we now call a watch commander position at the same station, maybe a little less hard to do. And that's exactly what you did at the Blythe station. Directly after becoming a supervisor there, you become an FOS at the Blythe station. How was that jump?
Pretty easy transition. When I got to Blythe, there was probably 38 people. I was probably number 38, right? And so it was a very small station. And then the station grew in manpower quickly and, got up to like 130 people. And so, as a supervisor, I was kind of in charge of a shift by myself anyway, right? And so then when with more manpower came more positions become available, the FOS position. And so I just kind of fell into that position. I was already kind of doing that as I progressed through.
Yeah, you hit on something, Chief Owens and I talked about it in my podcast as well, but the don't underestimate the exponential growth that this organization experienced in times where folks like you and I were first liners, second liners, maybe third liners, and just having to grow on the fly. There was no book for the Border Patrol on how to lead mass amounts of Border Patrol agents. I think every station has this story. I left here as a CDI and went to Eagle Pass South as a supervisor, and it literally was a brand new station. Laredo West, when I was there, a brand new station. So over time, we've gained these experiences on how to do this. But back in the day, there was no textbook. We just kind of jumped in, and you became the tenured soup, natural progression to the FOS position. Now you're second line command at a station. And it opens up an opportunity for you to become a special operations supervisor at the Deming station in the El Paso sector. So now you're working your way west. You start off on the far, let's call it almost the West Coast, move into Yuma. You skip Tucson for now. Yeah. We'll come back to Tucson. Yeah. And then you hit the El Paso sector at the Deming station as an SOS. What is it? I don't think we've talked about the SOS position very much. What does an SOS do at the Deming station?
So it was a little different back then, the way the positions were. It was kind of really third in command of the station at that time. You had your PAC and your APAC and then your SOS. More of administrative programs over the administrative pieces. But day-to-day operational things would still fall to an APAC. But I think, I think the easiest way to say administrative and programmatic functions are kind of what the SOS did.
So is it fair to say you're starting to learn the business of leading a station?
Yes.
So you're not in charge, you're not making shots, but at the same time, a lot of things are being tasked to you. You're privy to a lot of conversations on how to manage a station. We're going through exponential growth. I think Deming was probably growing pretty wildly at that point too. And so you're learning how to manage a station.
It was very different from the operational side, right? Mm-hmm. So supervisor, FOS, or watch commander now, right? And then switching over to the administrative side, the programmatic side. There's just things that you would never really think about, or you just make it happen. When we're talking about, there's really no book for this, right? When you're brand new at the station in Blythe, or you're brand new at the station as an SOS in Deming, there's challenges, and I don't think we're ever completely prepared for the next thing. We just go and we make it successful, which is part of what the Border Patrol does anyway, right? We every day we just make it happen. That's part of our tradition. We find our way to yes.
So that's a great point. I think that an additional cautionary tale as it relates from transitioning from supervisor to watch commander, you kind of hit on it with operational. You're in the field. You're for all intents and purposes, you're the patrol agent in charge of a unit as an FOS or a watch commander back in the day. And then you go to SOS, and this is where you start getting away from the field a little bit.
Yep.
So a part of the maturation of a leader in the organization also comes with a cautionary tale of you're separated from the field now. So you signed on to be a Border Patrol agent. You love the outdoors, whatever brought you into the Border Patrol. You start getting away from that a little bit. Is that true?
Yeah.
So while at Deming, you also have the opportunity to attend the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. This is in Leavenworth?
Yep.
Right. So you get the opportunity as a GS-13 SOS 12, 13 years ago now, which is extremely fast, by the way. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
extremely fast within a career, I should say. Traditionally within our careers, progression naturally. So you go to the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, and you get a master degree or Master of Science degree in Homeland Security Studies. What was your experience like there?
It was fun to be back in the Army for a year. Just, really focusing on leadership and that college was very centralized on leadership. It certainly made me a better leader, and to kind of reflect on a lot of scenarios and things and how can I self-improve and make the organization better. And then, just getting the message out there, it was eye-opening to see how many people within DoD didn't know what the Border Patrol really stood for or what we do. So it was great to be a guest and to do that, to tout the great things that our agency does.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've hosted, obviously I've been to the U.S. Army War College. We talked about that before in the podcast. I've also hosted several folks who have gone through DoD sponsored schools. Chief Owens was a product of that. Myself, Carl Landrum, who was here previously, and many, many others. Education is not a requirement in our organization. There's nothing, like when you sign up for a job, there's no requirement to have a bachelor's, a master's, any other kind of degree. But it does lend itself to leader development, just like you said. I think it's perfectly said. So obviously I continue to encourage aspiring leaders, up-and-coming leaders to, if you don't have a bachelor's degree, at least get that. We get paid very nicely for the job that we do, and it affords us opportunities like paying for an education. When you get the opportunity to apply for DoD-sponsored schools within DHS family, also encourage you to do that. But I also don't want to focus solely on, the DoD model, right? There are plenty of examples of folks out there who have attended other academic institutions and gotten their bachelor's or master's degrees on their own. Yep. And that's a perfectly acceptable route too. Not everybody can be sent to a DoD school. It's a very nice thing to have that opportunity. Some folks kind of characterize it as, well, you took a year off. I disagree. You didn't take a year off. You had an opportunity to step back from the fight for a minute. You had the opportunity to think long and big about the organization, the future of the organization, the people of the organization. But that doesn't mean you can't do those same things in other academic arenas. So Chief McGoffin, we both led under Chief McGoffin. He was my PAIC in Freer. He was your chief in Havard, which we'll get to in a minute. He's a prime example. He didn't go to a DoD school, but he took the opportunity to get a master's degree on his own through Gonzaga, I believe. Yep. Deputy of the Border Patrol Chief Hudak, same thing, Gonzaga as well. It's just an illustration that education is not required, but at the same time, it will, kind of polish off any edges that you might have. But at the same time, you get the opportunity to tell the story of the U.S. Border Patrol to a whole new audience who may not know anything about it.
Right. And I think it leads to, whether it's on the civilian side or DoD or wherever you get your higher level education, it's just goes a step further to make our organization known as a professional organization, right? So when we're sitting at a table with, decision makers from all the different agencies, and you hear the doctorate this and Juris Doctorate that, you want to have some credibility at the table for our agency as well, and I think that it does that. I'm so proud of, the civilian schools. I'm just so proud of, I'll give that advice of, given that advice, just, go to college, get that degree. Well, if you have an associate's, get that bachelor's. If you got a bachelor's, get that master's degree. And there's a few in my head right now that have recently gotten their bachelor degrees and are already working on their masters. Just super proud of them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I give that exact same advice, and I'm almost more proud of them. I don't want to say that out loud, but I'm almost more proud when they take the advice, because this is how I got my bachelor's, right? Yeah. Somebody sat me down literally in the same office that I hold right now, the exact same office, and said, I recommend highly that you go get an education, right? So I listened, and it paid off for me. And so for people to take your advice and educate themselves, it's a proud moment as well. So kudos to them for their accomplishment, but it kind of makes you proud too. So you kind of talk about having some credibility. You take that master's and then you walk up into the strategic atmosphere with that credibility in your back pocket, and you become an assistant chief in the planning division at U.S. Border Patrol headquarters after the SOS of Deming. How was that?
After every position you're going to ask about, I'm going to say it was fun. I make the best of everywhere I go. But DC, it was great. I got to, help author the 2012 to 2016 Border Patrol Strategic Plan.
Yeah.
The counter narcotics enforcement plans for the northern and southwest borders, and some DoD liaison work, and it's to see things at a national level is incredible. It's just the mission there is just great. And then that's one of those positions that I recommend to everybody that you gotta go up there and do it. And it's not just to check a box; it's to get rid of that tunnel vision that I talked about before, and to be a part of that national mission. I mean, just nationally, there's so many different things going on around the nation, and to be able to see a broader picture of that, it's fun.
Absolutely, the exposure at the national level cannot be underestimated for anybody or for any stretch of the imagination. So the planning division is within what directorate headquarters at this time?
SPAD or SPA.
SPA. So we talk a lot about the 4 directorates. We have Mission Support Division, we have Law Enforcement Operations, we have Strategy and Policy, and we have what we call PMOD, which is the programmatic management of all the things that we have. So you go up there and you kind of experience all these things, and then it takes you get rewarded. Right. You get rewarded for all your hard work and dedication at the headquarters level, and you pick up a deputy patrol agent in charge, the number 2 in charge of a station at the Ajo Border Patrol Station in Arizona. So we're circling back west again, going to Ajo. Tell me about Ajo.
My wife included. I just got married at the time when we went to Ajo and started our marriage together there, and by then she's already friends with a lot of PA wives and that kind of thing, and everybody's saying, "Oh, Ajo's so terrible. It's the middle of nowhere.
It gets a bad rap.
It's just gonna wreck your marriage and all these things." And we got there, and again, we made the best out of it. And I mean, she's got one of her best friends is from there. Just constantly, the mountain biking and the hiking and the hunting and all the different things that you can do, anywhere you go. As a family, we just had an absolute blast. But work-wise, it was funny you mentioned RGC, right? There was a couple of years there where we were neck to neck on who had the most marijuana seizures in a year. And I think, there was one year where we had more than anybody else in the nation. We had 360,000 pounds of marijuana. And then the following year, RGC got 363,000 pounds of marijuana in a year. So it was like neck to neck between the 2 stations. And it was, across the country, right? So here I am in Ajo, Arizona. You're over in Texas, right, in RGC, and just so everything you experience with the dope there it's different terrain though, right? So I spent time in Laredo, so I know what the terrain's like in RGC. Mm-hmm. But in Ajo, to me, looks more like Afghanistan, right? I mean, it's very dry, mountainous. You've got scouts on every mountain out there, constantly. Kudos to the agents. I mean, they work so hard in both environments, right? But there and I just day in day out. I mean, you couldn't find a group of harder working PAs out there just giving it their all, hiking up and down these mountains and catching smugglers and scouts and 360,000 pounds of marijuana. I mean, just phenomenal work ethic. Really great to see.
We talk a lot. So the RGC mentions is the Rio Grande City station in South Texas, where I was a PIC. He's referencing Ajo, where he's the DPAC, and eventually becomes the actual PAIC, the patrol agent in charge of the Ajo station. But for the non-border patrol agent listeners, what he's talking about is the Rio Grande City area of operation and the Ajo Tucson sector area of operation traditionally have the highest volume of narcotic seizures year over year after year. Those 2 stations, without a doubt, lead the nation. We generally we can parse it down into different categories. For example, which station, and this is a part of a 2012 to 2016 strategy. Which station had the higher weight per marijuana seizure, which is also an indicator of risk. So we tout these successes, but at the same time, it means we're probably getting beat. So if we're catching a quarter million, 400,000 pounds of marijuana, it requires a leader to look back and say, why, right? So we have to understand the entire operational environment. We have to make adjustments, and maybe catching, the greatest amount of volume of dope is important, but I also don't want to lead the nation like RGC did and the average weight per marijuana seizure. So it's an illustration potentially that the adversary that's smuggling that commodity, in this situation, marijuana, has a high degree of confidence of being successful in that area. So if you get a large tonnage and the average of that tonnage is much smaller, maybe you have a better illustration that the agents or the environment is less conducive to being successful, so they break them up into little groups. So this is just kind of how we have assessed risk as it relates to the interdiction of narcotics over time. And really not much has changed in terms of which station goes back and forth. But what has changed, if you look at, we talked about demographics up front, about what were you encountering in El Centro sector circa 2001. Now we're catching a lot more hard narcotics, right? So that's a whole nother ball game. It's a lot less volume, does a lot more damage to the American population. And like you say, kudos to the agents. They're out there seizing tonnage of these hard narcotics on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. Encourage you to follow other chiefs' social media accounts where they kind of highlight some of these interdictions and the hard work, highlighting the hard work that the men and women of these sectors are doing to keep not only each other safe, but the streets of America safe. So you pick up the actual patrol agent in charge of the Ajo station. Again, you kind of compressed 2 jobs into one. A little easier to do again. Again, don't recommend necessarily that that's the path for every single jump in leadership. Broader and deeper is a good thing. You've obviously demonstrated that. You've gone from West Coast, you've worked your way east, you've gone to headquarters now. You are fully capable of at this point being a GS-15 PIC of Ajo. Any other thoughts on the Ajo station as the PIC?
Just more of the same, just every day, just doing what we can. And there's some times, it's, your agents out there working hard, and sometimes they get hurt, and so I remember a few injuries that I was really concerned about, keep you up at night, that kind of thing. Yeah. When you're having that high volume of bad people and bad things coming through, sometimes your agents get hurt. And I, just looking back, as the PIC, you're responsible for those people and their well-being. So
I love that. I'm so glad you said that, because I have these conversations all the time, and so I would like your take on what keeps you up at night, and in the frame of a PIC, or maybe we can talk about it a little bit when you start talking about a chief. The weight just feels different, right? So you can be a deputy patrol agent in charge, and you can feel a certain weight on your shoulders. Excuse me. You can be a deputy patrol agent in charge and feel a certain weight on your shoulders of the magnitude of what you're asking people to do, right? So you're literally, as the DPAC, asking people to go conduct operations, literally put their lives on the line to enact a vision or a strategy to secure the border. Translate that over to the difference in weight from being a PAIC. So now the buck literally stops with you. If you come up with an operation and it's maybe a high risk operation that you've envisioned and you enact in your area of operations, and somebody gets hurt, somebody gets killed, do you feel a difference in the weight and the responsibility when you move from one progressively over time from a supervisor to an FOS to a DPAC, a PAC? Does that weight change?
I think it does. It's when you're as a PIC. I was a DPAC before that. pretty much the same things going on, but when you're the pack, you're overall responsible. I mean, it goes to the point of, well, I'm gonna always do what the pack wants as a DPAC, right? I'm always gonna do what the pack wants, as long as it's legal, whatever, we're gonna get it done. I'll provide my feedback. At the end of the day, we're gonna go on his course. As a pack, there's a lot of time for prayer at that point. Are you doing the right thing?
And maybe it speaks to if a decision or an adjustment from an agent standpoint, maybe you feel like it's not moving fast enough, or you think this operation that you recommended from your level as a Border Patrol agent isn't getting enough traction fast enough. Maybe consider all the things that are going through that patrol agent in charge's mind. You see this way, and you're not wrong, but I also have to see this angle. I have to see this angle. And oh, by the way, there's another angle over here that I have to see. So I'm not saying we're not going to do what you think is a good thing to do. And by the way, some of our best ideas, operationally or otherwise, come from PAs working the field.
Absolutely.
Right. So I've got to listen to them, and I'm not going to second guess their judgment. But at the same time, I have to make sure I'm taking the time necessary when I have that time and space to assess the totality of the decision before we make it.
Yeah, as looking back, I probably owe a few of my leaders some apologies. Thinking that
you and me both.
That I could have made a better decision in certain points, but they have, we have, this kind of umbrella, right? And you just you understand more about, you've got pressures from the public and from the media and from headquarters, or from not just headquarters, but like DHS, CBP. The PIC has that understanding where further down there's just that understanding's not there, which goes back to, hey, we want you to move around so you can see other things and see that this is not the the tunnel vision that we see because we've always done it this way in Calexico doesn't mean that Calexico has to do it this way. You take what you've learned here and you move it to the other. You take the good with you, right, and the bad, and know, okay, I don't want to do that because that turned out bad. I made plenty of mistakes, but we'll learn from them. And
we fail fast and don't repeat them.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
So now you talked about this kind of collective experience over time, and it takes you to the Laredo sector as a division chief. Tell me a little bit about the job of a division chief. What does a division chief do? I think you were a division chief of both over operational programs, as well as the division chief of operations for the Laredo sector. So you've made yourself all the way down to South Texas now. So tell me a little about what the job of a division chief does and your experience there.
So I would say certainly much more administrative. I mean, at this point, the PICs are the commanders in the field, right? They're running their stations. You're kind of that buffer between, or that intermediary between the chief, deputy chief, and the field, right? And so making sure that the strategic vision from headquarters, the operational vision from sector is being carried out at the station level, but you're there for support, right? There's lots of support needed from a PIC from each station, conflicting interests. Every station has needs, and so meeting those needs is a big piece of it, but also lots of administrative stuff, especially on the programmatic side, right? Anywhere from facilities to technology to the canine program, and then some things just that kind of bleed together. You may be the ops division chief, but you've got the programs division chief over canines, and that's an operational thing. Horses are an operational thing, but it's a programmatic thing as well, because you have to feed horses, you have to make sure that there's the appropriate amount of horses and trained horse wranglers, and then the list goes on. But
policy compliance. Yeah,
policy compliance, absolutely, all of those things. And so there's in a big sector like Laredo, it's a lot, but it's a lot of fun. You meet a lot of people, you do a lot of things. Stakeholder engagement is just as important at the sector level as it is at the PIC or at the station level. So a lot of that, but great positions. And I spent a lot of time as the acting deputy chief as opposed to being division chief of operations. At the time, I was most of the time in that billet, I was actually the acting deputy chief in Laredo.
Right. Yeah. So whenever we have leadership voids in a sector or at headquarters, we don't just magically produce more Border Patrol agents. And every other sector's personnel are busy taking care of the day-to-day functions or the administration of the vision and the operations of the vision of the chief. So we tend to, kind of colloquially referred to as take it out of hide, and the division chief or maybe the next senior person at the GS-15 level is asked to act or serve temporarily in a position of greater responsibility because that's probably all we have available to us. Nobody's offering more people up to Laredo sector just because they feel sorry for you. We just kind of do it organically within ourselves. And it's sometimes a stretch for people, but at the same time, it's a learning and leader development opportunity for everybody. So when you get that opportunity, maximize the opportunity to, and we act at all different kinds of levels. So Border Patrol agents act as supervisors sometimes. Supervisors act as watch commanders sometimes. When you're given those opportunities, maximize those things and work hard within that time. And maybe you find that job's not for you. Maybe you find that, hey, I really like this and I'm pretty darn good at it. Maybe it's something I want to pursue in my career further.
I think it's huge for our leadership development is to have those developmental opportunities, right? The acting position, I think, is just the best way to put somebody in there and they learn, and hey, I really like this. Right. May do it somewhere else, but I've got this experience that may not count for points or something like that, but it gives you an experience and every day's an interview, right? And so if you're acting in that position, you're much more likely people are going to know what you're capable of in that position.
Right. So it's funny. I always say this. I don't know which job I would want to do less between the two division chiefs. If it's the division chief of operational programs, where you have to manage all that whole entirety of the administrative side of running a sector, or be the division chief of operations, and you now have the responsibility of managing, personalities multiplied by the number of stations that you have, and having to make sure that everybody's in line with that vision. You start throwing the human element into it, i.e. managing the patrol agents in charge. You have to be a pretty good people person to make sure that the work is being done and that all the operations across an entire sector are done in alignment with the chief's vision.
Yeah, it's hard to describe or quantify the difference between the two, between operations and programs. At least on the northern border, you've got your ops division chief, and he's got one XO or executive officer, right? And then you go over to the programmatic side, and you've got the division chief of operations. He's got a couple of SOSs, a lot of Border Patrol agent BPAPs, a lot more manpower to do a lot more stuff, right? Because there's so many programs.
More stuff to do.
Yeah, more stuff to do. But it doesn't mean that the ops guy is not busy, right? He just has less. It's hard to quantify or describe the difference between the two positions.
No doubt. So you mentioned the northern border. You're currently the chief of Grand Forks, which is in North Dakota. But before that, you leave Laredo sector and you promote to the deputy chief patrol agent of the Havre sector. This is your first experience up north. So let's just say you basically covered all of the southwest border at this point in time, pretty much. But for a little bit of land there in West Texas, God's country. And then now you're going to dip your toes in the northern border a little bit. What was that jump like?
It was different, but a good different. Again, one of those things that's hard to quantify or describe, but it's the agents have a lot more autonomy. They can go out and do a lot more. Stakeholder engagement becomes much more, just like it's not a nice to have, it's a must have. Mm-hmm. It's funny, I'd go to the musters, I really like the northern border musters, such a small groups of people, and always went to the musters on the southwest border, that kind of thing, but just large groups of people. It was hard to kind of, really, have, not personal conversations, but more familiar conversations. And so my first few times in Montana, first few musters in Montana, I asked, hey, because I'm an outdoorsman, I love to hunt, always have. Fishing, hunting, that kind of thing is what got me into the patrol, right? I mean, just to be outdoors.
That story plays out all over the place,
And it shows, right, with all the Border Patrol agents that are like that. There's tons of outdoorsmen they're outdoorsmen and outdoor women that have grit, because they're just outdoor type people. But I get to Montana, and I ask one of the first things. I'm always passionate and excited about hunting or fishing, and I'm like, hey, who here likes to hunt? And everybody just looks at me like this weird face, like. And one agent speaks up and says, "Sir, you're in Montana. We all hunt." Okay, yeah, fair enough. So definitely with my people. And,
Let me say a little context real quick before you go on. So the northern border. Generally speaking, as an organization, we do not send. So I'm here at the Border Patrol Academy. Everybody that I train and I produce for chief patrol agents in the field are all first deployed to the southwest border. There was a brief point in our history, this is maybe 10, 12 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, where we kind of piloted a program where we actually sent trainees from the academy directly to stations in the northern border. But our bread is generally buttered on the southwest border. So we use everybody on the northern border is a tenured agent, right? So when you say you enjoy a muster, you're probably talking to a whole different crowd. You're talking, the least amount of tenure may have more time in than you at this point in time, depending on some of these stations. There's some tenure up there, and that has to be a completely different environment. Is that your sense as well for the northern border?
Absolutely. I mean, they're tenured. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're a lot of family people that went up there to it is a slower pace. There's still things to do, plenty of work there, but they'll go up there. They're experienced. They know what they're doing. They hit the ground running when they get there. And so though they have less supervision, it's because we've selected them to take that position up there, and they're it's. Well, like you said, they're tenured. They know what they're doing, so it's really no surprise that it's like that.
You and I talked a little bit this morning about just my experience in the first 60 days of my command and how impressed I am with my staff, what a joy it is to show up every day in an environment where people literally want to come to work.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Right, and I kind of get that same sense generally up north, but for some recent, southwest border deployments that are inarguably unpopular. Would you characterize that as the same environment where you can kind of set and forget a little bit, and they're going to go out and work hard because this may be home for them. This may be the home move.
Yep.
This may contribute positively to their home environment. They get a little more stability, that kind of thing. That's kind of how I've characterized my first 60 days. Is maybe the biggest surprise is just how energetic and motivated the staff is, because I think everybody that I've met so far literally wants to be here. This isn't their first assignment, so they chose to be here. So there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I agree. Just moving over to the next move in North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
Grand Forks sector covers North Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin.
Okay.
And as I go to those stations, those people are from there, right? Yeah. They're home. They're where they're from. They're happy, and it makes a couple of conversations hard, right? If I see, I see potential in a lot of people, and encourage them to, hey, you need to go to DC, you need to do this, to kind of thwart their career. I see, and they're not going anywhere. They're happy. They're where they're from, which is great, right? We want that experience and that community engagement. The people that are from there, they know the community. The community knows them. They trust, and trust is a big piece of our mission, right? Mm-hmm. So it certainly helps to have those, but there's a few out there that I'm like, oh man, if I could just coerce them to go to headquarters and do a little more. I mean, they would be my boss someday.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up trust. I think it was the central theme in a couple of conversations you had with 1179 this morning. You talk about not tarnishing the badge, not abusing the trust that is naturally going to be given to them as law enforcement officers. You seemed really passionate about that. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. It's we all worked hard to wear this uniform. Given the opportunity to wear plain clothes or to wear my uniform, I want to wear my uniform. And I'm proud to be a Border Patrol agent. And there's most of us are very proud of this job. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. Mm-hmm. And so. That that's the piece that, we have that piggy bank of goodwill, I think is what I talked
that's
about,
right. Exactly.
and so as we go into a community and we do all these great things, not only do we, focus on border security, which is national security, we're protecting the country, but we also do a lot of other things that are, to be a part of the community, whether it's, setting up a recruitment booth at a fair, or reading books to children at a school, and as you mentioned, there's a lot of our agents that are coaches
Yep.
to the sports teams. We're delivering babies in the field, or we're rescuing people from burning houses. I mean, all these things happen. I mean, it's me. I mean, we were talking earlier. Del Rio sector had the life-saving. They did CPR on somebody and brought them back to life.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these good things that we do. So I'm very passionate about the great things we do. And so, man, it just really hurts us when somebody does something bad, right? It's whether it's a DUI or domestic violence, or, God forbid, corruption or something like that. And so, it's important for all of us to kind of look to our left and right and make sure that we're all doing the right things, and that we speak up to each other, and keep each other in check, myself included. Like, keep me in check, Ryan, give me a call, what am I doing wrong here, that kind of thing. So because the trust is everything. We swore an oath to protect this country, and people look at the badge and they see a person that they can trust. We have to maintain that.
Yeah, I want to unpack a couple of things there. Number one, the trust, and you kind of talk about this relationship of keeping each other honest. Chief Owens and I talked about that in my podcast as well. Never underestimate that you are not alone. So no decision has to be made in a vacuum. If you're struggling with something, whether it's personally or professionally, in terms of, hey, how do I apply this? I'm actually having this problem with, my spouse or whatever it is. Saying that the U.S. Border Patrol, the members of the agency are a family, is not a bumper sticker to us. We call on each other. I've called you. I told Jason I've called him, and I have called, I generally try and get a second or third opinion on a major decision that I'm about to make, because it's important. And oh, by the way, I call people that I trust, So that's one thing. The other piece you mentioned was about just the humanitarian aspect of our organization, and our chief operating officer at CBP, Customs and Border Protection, the acting chief officer, Kari Huffman, who is a chief in the U.S. Border Patrol by title, and one of the most tenured Border Patrol agents that we have. He's on this campaign of CBP is the most humanitarian law enforcement agency in the world, and we have the stats to prove it. But you hit on something for me that I don't think we necessarily calculate in that statistic, is all the things we do outside of work.
Yeah.
Right. So how many stories do we have where Border Patrol agents have saved a life in a synagogue, at a Walmart in West Texas? These types of things where we run to the sound of gunfire 24/7, no matter if we're on or off duty. So when you ask that 1179 to raise their right hand this morning and swear an oath, you didn't ask them to swear an oath for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and take Saturday and Sunday off. You asked them to swear an oath to the Constitution, to the people of this nation, without purpose of evasion, right? But that was a 24/7 commitment. So to say that we are the most humanitarian law enforcement organization in the world is true, plus add on and off duty to that. I think you hit on that for me, and I think we underestimate the value we bring to the communities in which we protect.
Yeah, absolutely. That professionalism on and off duty, and then everything else is just, but like I was telling some media folks the other day that, in FY20, we rescued over 12,000 people nationwide. I mean, that's incredible. Just the other day we rescued a couple of folks, or 7 people, from hypothermia. Right. Crossing the border at negative 29 degrees Fahrenheit wind chill.
Hang on. So you're telling me on the northern border, people are crossing the border in the dead of night, and it's negative 30 degrees, and you guys are still out there on patrol?
Yeah, exactly, right? We're out there, and that's vigilance, right? So one of our core values, and just, so proud of our agents, again, just the hard work, wherever I go, it's just agents are just working so hard. Yeah. They're out there, and it was a blizzard. I think I even mentioned it on a call that, hey, we're having a blizzard,
That's right.
and then this happened.
Yeah.
And so it was complete whiteout conditions because there's snow on the ground. It wasn't actually physically snowing, but the wind was blowing so much you couldn't see from me to you because of this. It was a whiteout, and then with all that chaos going on and the negative temps and everything, we still managed to rescue 7 people from dying. Frostbite, had to medevac to a hospital, that kind of thing, but still, like, these people are alive because there were Border Patrol agents out there being vigilant and working.
Yeah. So a side note, if you guys haven't watched the podcast with former Assistant Chief Cliff Gill, Chief Owens interviewed Cliff Gill, who was very passionate about recognizing our people better. So this is one of these instances where inarguably this is above and beyond the call of duty. I mean, there weren't necessarily bullets flying at them, right? But they take their life in their own hands and they set out in an environment where they can't see their nose in front of their face to find and rescue people at their own high risk. So this is the type of program where we talk about resiliency and just what people generally are driven by in today's environment. It's not necessarily money. It's not necessarily time off. It's, in some instances, it's just really a thank you. And this is one of those examples where we can recognize formally these folks for going above and beyond the call of duty.
Yeah, and they're absolutely going to be, the ones I just spoke about, they're absolutely going to be recognized. As a matter of fact, the deputy chief of the patrol called and said, "Hey, are you guys going to be recognized?" Absolutely, chief.
Yeah, well, there you go.
But yeah, we'll be recognizing them. I won't speak about what the medal is, but they'll be getting medals.
It's a general frame, though, right?
Absolutely.
We take recognition of the values that we espouse and that we try and instill. And oh, by the way, they start right here at the Border Patrol Academy. We take the recognition of those things very, very seriously. Do we get it right every single time? No. Are there people in our past who have not been recognized for true valor and things like that? Absolutely. But we can always continue to get better, and we will.
And we can fix our mistakes. There's an agent several years back before I was the chief of Grand Forks, and he got in a shooting and did some, he saved lives.
Yeah.
And so we're putting him in, for previous. He's already retired from the Border Patrol, but we're working on getting him a medal.
Right.
So it's just takes time for some of those.
So shout out to former Chief Gill there, Assistant Chief Gill. Thanks for the work that you have done and the work that you continue to do. We definitely appreciate it, and that legacy will be carried forward with the recognition of our employees. So I want to talk to you. You mentioned you're now in Grand Forks, but I want to talk a little bit about how you got there. So you go, and again, this is not unique necessarily to you. I talked to Chief Scudder about this, Chief Landrum about this, Chief Owens and I have talked about this. We're all part of this Department of Homeland Security Senior Executive Service Candidate Development Program, otherwise known as DHS SCS CDP, right? It's a 1-year kind of academic environment where we get broadened and educated on how to be an executive, how to do that properly. There is a reward at the end of that program with a certification, non-competitive certification for the selection of SES anywhere in the government. But within that, and you've heard me talk about it, we talk about this developmental assignment idea. So we're going back to broadening. You did your 120-day or so developmental assignment as the acting deputy federal security director with the Transportation Security Administration, otherwise known as TSA, at George W. Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston, Texas. Tell me a little bit about that assignment, what you gained out of it, what you did, and what you gained out of it.
It was so neat to see how another agency, does things, a lot of things the same and a lot of things very different. I think, they got some value of me being there to be able to say, some different programs and things to like kind of encourage. And it was funny, a few years after, there were some ideas that I kind of pitched and that kind of thing where I would get calls back, hey, I just wanted to, or an email back and say, hey, just let you know, we finally did this thing you were talking about, or whatever the case may be. So that was a great feeling. But it was, I was the one that gained the most out of it, only being there for, what was it, 4 months, 20. So just, I gained so much. And again, more partnerships, more friendships. Those people that I can call now. If I need information on, hey, how does TSA run this? We start worrying about Afghanistan folks coming over to particular airports, and they're running through TSA and CBP and these kind of things. There's people you can call, because we didn't expect this to happen, and now we got these phone calls that we can make and stuff. So it's anywhere you can go and develop partnerships and friendships. I mean, it's just that stakeholder engagement is just it's huge.
And it's paying dividends for you now in your current role,
right,
as the chief of Grand Forks, where again, the development of relationships is how business gets done.
Yep.
Right. You don't have, 3,000 or 4,000 Border Patrol agents at your disposal with high volume of migrants crossing the border every single day. You got to work differently in a different space with different people.
Yeah, and it's not just when I say stakeholders, it's not just the sheriff's office, sure, or the city police or RCMP on the other side, with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or CBSA at the ports. All those partnerships are so important, but also the community itself, right? And so the eyes and ears of what's going on in a community, just being able to, the farmer that lives right there on the border, he knows what's different, what's going on different. He's working on his tractor, he's on his porch sipping coffee, whatever he does, like, he knows what's different, and he's been there his whole life, and he knows that something's different. And so they can call us, or they can call our partners who we have great relationships with, and our partners will tell us, hey, Border Patrol, we need help over here, or you might want to go check this out and investigate this. And we might miss it, right? But we might find a backpack with some information in it, and then we can start an investigation and that kind of thing. And so it's those partnerships, that stakeholder engagement, it's huge, and it's just a must-have on the northern border.
Yeah. So I think it's a natural segue into why we're here today, the What's Important Now podcast. So, Chief, I'd like to give you an opportunity to maybe tell us, or tell the audience, maybe the top 2, 3, 4 things that are on your mind, and what's important to you now as the chief of the Grand Forks sector.
So, I know I talk a lot about stakeholder engagement, huge. I won't hit on that more, but just it's for all those reasons that I've already mentioned. It's top of my mind. We're detailing agents down to the southwest border. There's less Border Patrol agents on the northern border, that kind of thing, and so those partnerships are paying off more and more, and so it's important. Secondly, I would say innovation, right? And you had mentioned earlier that, the best ideas come from the agents, and it's true. There's no way around that. It's just we've got to listen. And so a message to all the leadership out there is, we listen to our folks. They have great ideas, and we can't, make everything happen. So, we got to pick and choose which ideas we go with. But innovation is, it's the path forward for us to solve our problems. And we're the agency that, lastly, I'll say tradition, but our tradition is to get things done. We just make it happen. And so lastly, tradition, just, I'm so proud to be a part of this organization. And so, I want to see our values, we have traditions, and, whether we're in black or tan boots, that's not the tradition I'm talking about. It's the tradition that, no matter where I go, whether I'm a Border Patrol agent or a supervisor or a chief, I'm treated like family. I get to someplace and people, everybody, all the Border Patrol there, CBP there, they, do you have everything you need? Is everything okay? What do you need? Schools for your kids, and whatever the case may be, like, people have my back, and so I just always cognizant of that, want to return that always. I want to be a part of this family. I'm so proud. And that's, I think, the hardest part for retirement for any of our agents is, or for any of us, is just, feeling like, we're always a part of the family, but man, not seeing your family every day. Yeah. Right. And that's, love my family with my wife, my kids. They're all grown up now, out of the house, which I recommend empty nesting to anybody. It's been great.
Well, thanks
my wife,
for that.
Yeah, my wife and I love it. And you'll get there someday. It's a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
But really, just the tradition of family, the Border Patrol treating each other, because the other tradition of just being the agency that gets stuff done. Yeah. I mean, you can just look at what's going on the southwest border right now, and Border Patrol is just getting stuff done. We're taking agents from the northern border and taking them down there and doing that. I mean, just we don't take no for it. We don't settle for mediocrity. We're just experts, and we just get it done. No matter what the case is, we get it done. So that's a strong tradition that very proud of, but also the family piece, right? We all treat each other like family. We're there for each other in the good times and the bad times. We're always looking out for each other, and I just want to see that continue to grow.
Yeah, that's I couldn't think of three better things from your perspective, for sure. And thank you for that. And I appreciate those messages. I will take the opportunity on the heels of that, talking about family and tradition specifically. And I don't want to get too far ahead out of Chief Ortiz, our chief of the U.S. Border Patrol. But for anybody doing math, we're coming up on our centennial anniversary. All right,
Very exciting.
We are coming up on our 100-year anniversary. This is a huge milestone. Yeah. And for an organization as young as we are, if not steeped in tradition, in family. We do have a working group put together, comprised of a chief patrol agent from the academy, me, a chief from the coastal environment, a chief from the northern border, and it's being led right now by Chief Chavez, who's the chief in El Paso. But the brilliance of the group that Chief Chavez put together is it is wrought with family, former chiefs, people who are deeply involved in the family networks of this organization, the true heart and soul of our organization. Those people that represent our families are involved in this working group too. So more to come on that. Please stay tuned for updates on the centennial celebration that we are planning on behalf of the entire U.S. Border Patrol to celebrate our 100th year of existence from 1924 to 2024, and hopefully another couple hundred to come. So I will give you the floor once more, Chief, before we close out. We talk a lot about literally from day one. When I EOD or enter on duty a class, I talk to them on day one about what Honor First is. And one of the messages I give to them is it's a motto, right? And it literally means something different to everybody. And that's kind of the beauty of it. But you don't have to necessarily, tell everybody what Honor First means to you. And that's the motto. It's just the one hit, Honor First, and we all know that it means something to somebody. So I'd like to hear your take on what Honor First means to you.
So a combination of pride, tradition, and integrity.
Yeah.
The key things I've hit on already. But when I think of somebody that's honorable, they have integrity. When I think of honor in any other thing, like a kind of a military, being from the Army, I think of tradition, and honoring that. So I would say, and I'm very proud of those things. So I throw those three words together as pride, tradition, and integrity.
Yeah. Chief, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for your graduation comments for Class 1179 this morning. They're off probably running towards the southwest border right now, literally. But again, thank you for making the trek out to Artesia, New Mexico from Grand Forks. I know that trip was not easy. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's I'm enjoying the weather here.
It's a little warmer here.
Yeah.
So thank you again, our listening audience, for tuning in to the latest episode 3 of Season 2 of the What's Important Now podcast. Honor First.